So Krists, what do you do?
Hi, my name is Krists. I am entrepreneur in residence at Unilab Defense, which is a NATO DIANA acceleration site. So part-time, I'm working with defense tech startups in DIANA program and helping them to figure out how to apply their technology into defense use cases. And then other part of my time, I've recently started a new defense tech startup. So been in this business for some years. And now I'm working in the area of agentic specialist soldier augmentation.
Concept of operations for new defense tech startups.
What about it?
Yeah, so that's a big problem, right? When I have new tech, how do I even use it?
Yeah, I mean, so here in the DIANA program, and I've been to quite a few other programs happening in different places, including Ukraine. So I've probably seen, few hundred defense tech startups over the last few years. And usually, they think they have this great technology. And then they are like, well, we want to bring it to the end users, but how does the two come together? And where does the technology fit in, right? Because the defense end users, they're not the tech geeks of San Francisco. They don't just buy the shiny new technology because someone on X wrote about it.
Yeah.
And they're buying capability, right? So for the startups, it's super important to understand first how the defense end users think. So what does the concept of operation mean for them? How do they plan their capabilities, and what do they actually want to achieve? What kind of effect? And then on the other hand, going into the specific vertical, what kind of end user type you're targeting, just need to meet them, sit down with them, sort of sift their minds, their way of thinking, and then try to kind of come back to, okay, how do we fit in?
Yeah. So could you give an example of this?
Okay, let's say in the cluster here, we have this team Volta, right? They're coming from space technology background. They're doing lasers and cables for spaceships, freaking amazing. And they have technology that can bring connectivity and power on the battlefield or frontline commands. But how exactly that power and how exactly they would deploy their technology, right? In what kind of situations is that active frontline? Is it forward deployed bases? How do they get their lasers and cables in place? Is it air drone, land drone, just humans putting it there? So there's a lot of nuance in and a pretty big gap in between just having a nice technology that works not just in the lab but in space, and then finding how exactly that would fit in the military way of thinking and mission planning. And that's what we're sort of trying to help teams with here.
Well, so how do I do it? Do I have to be in a program? How would I go about doing that in general? Because I feel like when I try to talk with military people in general, they're somewhat secretive about their situation. Ukrainians are maybe better because they really, really want help. So I think they're more open-minded. But maybe that's the Ukrainian meets because they come out of Ukraine. Maybe they're more open-minded as it is. But yeah, how would I go about understanding this?
Sure. I think first of all, what makes Ukraine a bit different to my mind is that due to mobilization, you have a lot of, former company managers, engineers, other specialists now being brought into the army, and they still bring their sort of civilian approach with them. And then you have diffusion, right? And they're not used to living in silos, right? They've been doing normal jobs in tech companies and whatever, right? Even look at the current unmanned systems forces commander, Commander Magyar, right? He was a grain trader, right? He was in agro-business, right? So he'd know a lot about data and stuff, but he's not necessarily coming from a kind of long background in the military. So, and I think you can find somewhat similar setups on a smaller scale across other countries like Europe. So usually you have the national defense forces, you have the standing army, which in most European nation cases is not too big, and then you have formations like, National Guard or some sort of part-time paramilitary formations, right? And there you have actually they have very few staff officers who are full-time military for 20 years, and you still have a lot of guys who are going to the military service, once a month for the weekend, and they also bring this sort of similar mindset of being civilians and then taking the military hat. So I think first of all, it's super useful if you're building in defense tech space, if you're joining this sort of paramilitary defense organizations in your own country yourself, helps with understanding the basics of military mindset. Or sort of reaching out to these institutions first, because they tend to be kind of, more flexible and agile in terms of trying out new technologies. Because mostly, in type of National Guard units, you would meet kind of civilians like yourself who happen to be doing defense jobs over the weekend. So that would be my kind of recommendation of the easiest door to open. Number one. Number two. I think that the silos thinking is changing, and it has been changing dramatically over the last few years, and more defense end users globally see that you can't get stuck with buying stuff that's been designed in 70s or 80s, right? And the world is just rapidly changing, and you need to become more open to kind of emerging civilian technologies. So quite a few European countries have set up something some form of innovation command. So you have dedicated officers responsible for being the front door to the industry. And sometimes it's literally just finding someone who knows someone and just reaching out. Myself, I've started to build a new defense tech company just a couple of months ago. And recently I went to one of sort of special commands, let's put it this way. And the guys there were like, well, you are the second team that have reached out to us in the last few years. And I was like, wow, amazing. So it's they may seem scary guys, but they don't get their doors knocked too often. So sometimes you just have to try, and they were like, oh, well, someone wants to talk to us. Right?
Thank you. We've been waiting for so long. There we go. All right. So, but can you talk about this military mindset? So what is different from a military mindset from a civilian mindset? Because we're thinking about sales. I mean, I was in B2B mostly before. So I do think it's a difference. But what would you say, what is, if I start to untangle that, what is the difference between a military mindset compared to a civilian mindset from the buyer or user?
Well, I guess I'm the wrong person to talk about it because I don't have a military background.
No, I think you're the perfectly right person because you've seen it, because you've been civilian and now you're seeing this. There's this.
Well, I'm still a civilian, right? I have no military
exactly.
rank.
No,
okay,
but
let me give another example, right? I spent about 10 years being an executive in telecommunications and critical infrastructure industry, right? And we were both serving the government and all of these defense security end users and quite different applications. And we were also buying stuff, right? And for telcos to buy stuff, if we buy a new platform, we factor in that we're going to use it for the next 20 years, upgrades and so on, but it's a very long-term investment. If we buy some new networking technology, that thing may run for 30 years, right? So when you have this sort of very kind of long-term usage of the thing you're procuring, you become just much more conservative about, will the company be still around here 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road where we need the
does the company even exist? I mean, not even if the tech works anymore, but can I get it serviced? Yeah. Startups struggle with that kind of.
Are they a safe partner? Nowadays you have a lot of supply chain attacks. Someone injects something not in you directly, but in your suppliers, and then the cyber warfare just spreads from there. So it's just natural that and the military guys, they've been used to look, a lot of the stuff that's still being put on the field, tanks, IFVs, etc. open up Wikipedia, you can see that stuff is being designed like 70s, 80s, a bit of upgrades in the 90s.
I mean, if I gave it to my wife,
lifetime extension in the 2000s, right?
We still have T70s going, right? That in the war, yeah.
I mean, you have the T55s and 54s in Ukraine, right?
There we go. Well, so one thing in the change is that they're looking at a way longer time horizon. Like I would guess, as a B2B, as a normal B2C person, like if I buy something, I'm thinking about the now. Maybe, even cars are used, 5 years?
Yeah.
How long are people sitting in one car? Like people have had the car more than 7 years, like, wow, it's a veteran car or something. Like we were like, wow, that's incredible. So I guess, so the mindset should be, I'm thinking every little thing I'm buying, if it's a shovel, if it's a car, if it's a radio system, it should last my career, basically. Like because the military careers are shorter.
That was true historically, right?
Yeah.
But I would say now the times are changing. Because the world finally sees how the warfare has changed over the last couple of years, and it's literally changing every quarter. Some new doctrines come out, and just the speed of change is so radical that now you can see a bit of mind shift into, okay, how can we get our hands on a bit of the latest and greatest? Maybe not stock up for the next 10 years immediately, but have the supply chain capability, have the manufacturing in place, and the industry that can kind of iterate and keep up with the times and latest developments. And once we need it, we can call up for bigger numbers. So that's sort of where the discussion now is going into, being more courageous about trying new stuff and seeing if it really, moves the needle, not necessarily stocking up for, the rest of the lifetime, but rather looking into, well, if we need, how quickly we can ramp up the supply chain and actually get stuff delivered at scale. But
it's still similar. I really like this because I'm now thinking that's the mentality is that whatever I buy, I would possibly be responsible for it as well. But let's say it's radio systems. Whatever radio system I was part of purchasing, that I would see that for the rest of my days in the military. I'm just thinking about how strong that is of a commitment that I was part of building this, and it will be here for as long as I'm known in this industry. So I think that, and that's the heritage they're coming from. So changing that to any faster purchase, it will be very different for the organization. Even though they are doing new things, I can see where that's coming from. And then, but there's still some logic to it that you said, can you be around to deliver? Because even if I want to scale it up later, how do I know that? Yeah, I like this. I want to have 100 more, 1,000 more. How do I know if you're around? So I can see that they still have to consider that part. Sure. So there's similarities, even though it wouldn't be 20 years. It's still.
I want to chip in two things, right? You mentioned radios, right? Actually, I think it's like 2023. I was in Ukraine. I met a team building radios. It was called Chimera. They're still around, right? And at first I was like, well, why are we building field radios? There's plenty of them out there.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, look, the NATO countries use what? You have the Motorola's, you have, a bunch of
Harris, maybe.
Harris, yes, thank you. I was like, when was their last model developed ground up? And they were like, well, probably 10 years ago.
Ground up, yeah.
10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? And the guys were like, well, and it was like fall. And they were like, this is our 8th iteration this year.
Yeah.
So if you take one new product every 10 years versus roughly one major iteration a month, that gives you 100x iteration difference over this sort of 10-year period, right? And that is what is changing. People start to change their assumptions of okay, we bought this stuff and put it in the shelves and it's going to last for those 10 years. Well, now there's much more stuff is not going to last 10 years. It's going to become outdated, in next 6, 12 months, right? So that awareness and the speed of iteration just changing the game. The other thing I want to mention about, being around, right? That is a struggle for a lot of startups in defense tech industry, right? And you have a couple of it's a credibility risk and it's basically business risk. Now, I would say DIANA programs are helping with the credibility risk that, someone, anyone in the local militaries in Europe, they if someone in the NATO has put a stamp on it and said this is good stuff. They can always say, well, NATO said it's good, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this wasn't me. It wasn't me.
So that helps with the credibility part. That NATO DIANA has done some vetting. We've been following through their progress over a certain period of time. And then you have the funding part or the survivability part, and that's actually like when we kind of evaluate the progress of teams within the DIANA program. That's one of the things we look for. One of the 4 major criteria is basically, will they be around a year or 2 years from now, either through grants, either through customer purchases, or from venture investment, right? And then, you've seen like defense tech investment has been picking up lately, last few years. Maybe a bit of bubble, but capital can be a moat if deployed properly. Namely, that's sort of the game for some of those kind of major VC deals. Is like, well, there's this one company that has this like 1 or 2 or 3 drones, and they have a bit of their own operating system. We'll try to shovel them with money, and they'll buy up IP from others, and hopefully like they will have the capital to survive. When the others will just die out, and then they'll be able to pick up the IP, right? And now you can see, let's say, Ukrainian market was super vibrant when it started. Very much grassroots communities kind of type of situation. You had about Brave One program, which sort of initiated their national kind of drone race. They had about 2,500 drone companies listed in Ukraine alone, but most of them were like single garage operations, right? Few guys, bit of government grants here and there. And now from this wild west, you see that there's like some winners are emerging. Top 5 probably have, north from $1 billion revenue annually. And you can see sort of consolidation, either through kind of holding companies or partnerships, but they're, not in like 2,500 independent companies. You can see like 5, 6 major clusters of companies that try to, like center of gravity, pull in the smaller teams, and then together form the muscle, the capital, and the survivability to be around in the long term.
But I haven't thought about this with this way, so thank you for sharing this, because I'm realizing I almost have to have an investor backing me for this to work. Because I had one example now that I spoke with earlier today, and they were saying for us going exercises, we were talking about cost of an exercise. I said, like, the exercises are free, but they said for us to go there, it's round numbers 100,000 euros to go, because we need to have our equipment with me, our people, and it's like a week long. So it's like, costs are like 100,000. And I realized that there's very few small companies that can take that cost. And that's just showing your stuff. That's not it being bought by anybody. So I'm realizing, and for me to trust that you're going to be around, like, you need to have some millions backing you. Otherwise, I'd be like, how do I know that you're going to be here 3 years from now if I need an upgrade?
Well, you don't always need the millions, right? But you need to start somewhere.
Yeah. No, but I mean, eventually, like, if I don't, or if I get sales that very early, then the company becomes sustainable. But if I don't have that, I almost need an investor.
Well, no one said that defense technology is an easy business, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You have like a combination of like need for very quick product iterations with a very long buyer cycle, right? So, pitch to contract can take months, half year,
it has
years,
all the
right?
worst characteristics.
Exactly, right? So you need to be a bit crazy or really passionate about it to navigate in that environment.
All right. Well, thank you. So, what about this role here? How are you helping the teams? What are you doing?
Okay. Well, I guess my job is like, because I've been and I'm still am a founder myself. I can relate to the teams, like, and I work in defense tech as well, right? So my job is basically to understand what do they need, right? What kind of prospective users they should meet, right? Because if you just like take a technology and put it in front of a bunch of military guys or ladies, it will not necessarily create a match, right? You need to have certain understanding. Okay, here are the possible use cases for this technology. These are the end users we should link them up with, and then kind of how can we help them, right? So we have in the DIANA program, you have guidelines from the NHQ to all of the accelerator sides of, we should roughly cover these and those topics. But we have the opportunity and responsibility to actually decide how exactly we're helping the teams we're responsible for, right? So that requires understanding the context and a little bit looking forward of how those guys could be deployed to the field and what they're missing to get them there.
So how do you help? Can you give some example of that, or how? I'm thinking how to do that. Of course, I'll sit on some cool technology, and then how do you translate that into what, like how it should be used? How is that done?
It's a good question.
I'm thinking I want a do-it-yourself version that our listeners can see, like
do it yourself. Well, I have a bit of a cheat sheet here because from my time of dabbling around in the venture, I think I've seen and heard about, I don't know, I think we screened about few thousand startups to make like 40 deals, right? So like if you go through a certain process few thousand times, it sort of sticks in your bones, right?
Like you take Tinder a little bit too much.
Exactly.
1,000 to get 40.
But essentially, like, look, it's fairly simple, right? It's the classical questions, just with a bit of different context, right? So, what is the value that you think you can provide, right? And to which user, right? And sometimes, like, especially like when you have like these deep tech companies that start in the lab. And they don't necessarily start with a problem, but they start with an invention. Then you have a bit of a problem-seeking or solution-seeking problem situation, right? So it's not uncommon in defense tech, right?
I think that's the most common is that I have a tech I think is going to be useful.
Yeah.
But I don't know really where I fit it in. I mean, I guess that's what that we would recommend if we were coaching a normal startup. I'd be like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, we can say that's
a
problem, but then it's not how deep tech science work in many cases, right? So we have to stay flexible around that. But then, okay, let's kind of do the double diamond design thinking process and go broad. Like, what are all the possible use cases that you can think of, right? What is the secret sauce you can bring to the table, right? Is it like speed, decision making, precision, impact of the effects? It's basically how big bang you can generate, etc. And then kind of think, okay, who might benefit from that, right? So it's basically translating your technological capability into kind of a bit of a feature list and the outcomes. What outcomes could your technology create? And then you can sort of try to sort out, who would be the possible end users. And quite often it's not like you don't get it right with the first time, right? You need to, like teams here, they've talked to end users from different units, from different commands, different ranks. And it's a bit of a process to kind of, figure out where do you fit in the best.
Yeah, and I think that's the benefit of the program. I wrote down mentors here because when you do this double diamond perspective, that I have to think of what are the potential user cases, even if not all of them are good. As most civilians, I would consider myself part of this. Like the only reason I can do this reasonably well is because I talk with guys like you. And anytime I have Ukrainian, I'm like just pull them and talk what's going on right now, what's working, what's not working, and all this. So like I sit on maybe more knowledge than your average person, but like all these mentors that's what I think the benefit of programs like this. And I think mentors. I don't know if you agree on this, but like mentors seems to be. I can only do part of this myself if I'm. You're too, and I think most people are too close to the tech. Like they understand it so well, but they don't understand the user case. It's it feels like it's almost impossible for them if nobody's helping.
Or challenging.
Yeah, challenging. Yeah, well, nothing is.
Which is just giving some tough love sometimes also needed.
Exactly. I like the coaching angle. It's like you can do it. Like it's no problem. Yeah. But what about the using or getting access to information from Ukraine? Because I was in a call with you not too long ago, and you were mentioning many times like how and the reasons to get access to Ukraine, how to use that. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, I guess it's getting better. Like a few years before, there was basically only one way how to set up collaboration with Ukrainians, just going there and being on the ground, right? Now some years have passed and the Ukrainians themselves have understood that like their know-how is a value, right? And then they start leveraging that in different sort of government to government deals, et cetera, and then they have like formal programs. I think now there's even a formal program, something like Test Your Tech in Ukraine or something like that, run by Brave One, where Western companies can apply and test their stuff. Most likely not immediately in the field, because a lot of European stuff that hasn't been tested in the field usually does not work in the first go, but rather in some polygon, and then doing some iterations there, and then maybe doing some frontline testing. You have even some like with the better known brigades, which are now corps level units, like the 3rd Assault Brigade. They have their own dedicated technology testing unit / accelerator. And more of programs like Dark Star guys are doing a great job, kind of bringing Ukrainian, non-Ukrainian teams for like intensive boot camps with many different end users, some polygon testing, etc. And so you have actually quite a lot of programs set up which are reasonably accessible. It still requires going into Ukraine, right? Everyone should be aware of that. If you want to be in defense technology business, you by default assume you need to be there from time to time, right? Otherwise, you're sort of operating with outdated assumptions. And then, like I've seen a bunch of companies just like working with NGO community. So there are a lot of NGOs that have really good connections with end users there because they've been supporting them throughout the year. So usually, that creates like good bonds, and then that is not a route one can take. But I can't say that like in terms of Europe at large, look, those cooperation channels for me seem a bit scattered. Like some countries are trying to do some bilateral thing. Then in case of DIANA, to the extent to which we try to bring the Ukrainian experience in the loop is very much a decision of a local accelerator site, right? So there's no kind of general policy around it.
Have you seen any transformations, like a company you have met and then they went and worked in Ukraine and came back with, and like, have you seen anything change?
If nothing has changed, then I don't know what you've done there.
Yeah. Okay. No, but I'd be curious if you had if there was some concrete example that the product was doing this, and then they went to Ukraine, and 1 month later, actually they kind of pivoted, and now it does this other thing, and that does it really well.
I think I haven't seen that many like radical pivots that someone would build like, I don't know, flying drones and then pivot to building warships or whatever, or the other way around. But rather, it's completely rethinking the doctrine, the technical characteristics, and just like seeing what works and what doesn't work. So there's like a lot of iterations usually happens on the technological capabilities of the product, on the repairability, right? Because like if stuff breaks down, you need to design for battlefield conditions that someone on the ground can, take a hammer and do like the basic fixes, right? So sometimes you have like over-engineered things that just shouldn't be there because like the end users will, like, not going to call names, but like I've seen a lot of expensive European drone platforms being shipped to Ukraine and then gaining dust in warehouses.
Oh no, the dust killed it.
No, it's
our only weakness.
So look, there's a bit of logic behind that, right? So Ukrainian units have their I'm not sure what's the right name, but like loss budget, or how much equipment they can write down every month in losses. And if you exceed certain threshold, then you get some issues with, Inspector General and et cetera, right? So imagine like a European country sends like a few €100,000 worth drone that hasn't been fully tested on the battlefield conditions, so it may or may not fly. Now, for that money, they can probably get like battalions worth of local produce that has been tested, right? So what do they choose? Even though it's free stuff, paid by some European government, they choose the latter, and then just that expensive stuff is sitting on the shelves. Now, it's changing. That's a good thing, right? I still have some pictures on my phone with some European drones sitting as like coffee table in a frontline commander's office. But finally, I think like mid 2025, that stuff is kind of changing in the sense that like more of these European companies are getting more serious about not just like shipping something, but like establishing their local branches in Ukraine and being much more engaged with the end users so that they actually can catch up with the speed of iterations.
And I think if we didn't have that before, I think it's beaten out of us now that we're not superior in making technology. At least that works. We're
great at making technology.
Yeah, but
it just doesn't mean that it's going to be actually useful in real life missions, right?
Yeah, or at least not the way we thought it was going to be designed. All right. Well, is there anything to run this off? Is there anything that you think that we're not talking enough about that we should bring up to the surface as a defense tech community?
Well, there's this saying that everyone prepares to fight the next war as the last one, right? So now drone is kind of a mainstream word. Now the question is what comes next, right? So I guess 2026, the drone market is quite crowded. I would kind of expect more of consolidation there. And then the question is what's next? Because there will be the what's next part. I think like all in all, there's a lot of room of improvement in the kind of first, like having the capability to really mass manufacture. I think that's yet to be unlocked in many cases, right? We're still being like, the manufacturing automation is an area that can be improved. So like if shit happens, you can like churn out the robots and the drones like in Star Wars, the Star Wars series when the evil droids were fighting the Jedi, right?
Oh, I love those.
And then
these ones with the shields.
then the question is about like AI applications on the software layer, how to orchestrate all of that together, and how to fuse humans and drones. I think we're now all talking about the drone part, and I think there's still a lot that has to be automated on the actual physical human side of things, because humans will be part of defense and battlefield. It's sort of in the European and Western charter that I don't think we're going to get to like a full AI kill chain anytime soon, because all the NATO papers talk about kind of human in the loop.
But even that, like in Ukraine, they've been doing this for 4 years now, and they're not dumber than it. They're smart just as us, and they still struggle with the full AI kill chain. It's not really working well. I mean, one guy told me one issue is, for example, what's a functioning car or functioning vehicle and a non-functioning vehicle? What's the difference? A person laying still, is it dead or alive? Like it's different for a drone. It's very difficult to decide. So if you do everything AI, like there's these nuances that becomes very difficult to do for a drone or for an AI, fully AI.
It's functional nuances and then also kind of philosophical nuances. Right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Do we want to have autonomous AI killing people?
They want to live in the Terminator movie scene.
But I even thought about the word now. We have a motorized infantry, mechanized infantry. If somebody asked me now if an infantry mechanized, I'd be like, that means that they're all drones. Like mechanized used to mean like that they have infantry fighting vehicles and stuff, but now I'm like, do you mean that the whole army is drones? But that was what mechanized sounds like to me now. Like it's not just humans are not fighting. The last guys I spoke with, I mean, whatever we talk about, this becomes dated eventually. But it's like they're really trying. I don't know which brigade he was from, but a Ukrainian guy. But they were trying to not just have people at the front at all. Like they just try to get rid of them. If an engine can do it, or if a drone can do it, that's what we go for.
There's definitely certain amount of replacement. However, there was a pretty recent interview with the commander of 3rd Corps in Ukraine, quite famous general there, and he talked about like currently probably drones can replace like 30% of the what the frontline foot soldiers would do, and he expects that number to increase to about 80% over the next few years, but it's not going to be 100%, right?
80% would be insane. Like I think we as West fight with the equivalent of close to 100%. So if the true number is somewhere between the current 30 and the possible optimal 80, we're going to see a shift. Like there's going to be a big shift in it for preparing for the next war.
That's what we need to prepare for.
That's right. All right, Krists, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.